Good morning. Welcome to our YouTube viewers' opinion segment, which is basically where we tell you, give you the option of the top 5 stories of the day, and you, the viewer, tell us what you think the most story of the day is. And based on your decision, we then assign our reporters, our resources to follow up on that. This is where we put you in the driver's seat so that you can tell us what the most important story is for you today. So these were the options. Pick the story you want to follow today on NDTV 24/7. You can see there were almost 4,000 votes cast so far in an hour. The options were whether Omar Abdullah and Mehbooba Mufti, former chief ministers, democratically elected chief ministers being charged under the Public Safety Act, the PSA, or Prime Minister Modi's first visit to Assam, where it's going to be his first visit, where he'll be addressing the people of Assam after the passing of the CAA law, and then the protests that we've seen against it that have taken place all over the country. There's the plea of the Nirbhaya convicts that's going to come up in the top court this afternoon. There's also that Chinese doctor, the one who first warned of the coronavirus, dying in a hospital in Wuhan, and the image of the day, that ice mass smashing into the sea in the Antarctica. So these were the options, and here's what you, the viewer, have picked unanimously. Well, 60% of you have voted for the Omar Abdullah Mehbooba Mufti story. Next, Prime Minister Modi's first visit to Assam after those anti-CAA protests took over all over India. The coronavirus story, what is India's response going to be? We're going to have the health minister speaking on this, giving the government's response so far. That's also coming up today afternoon. All eyes on the Supreme Court, where that plea of the Nirbhaya convicts is coming up. Both the Delhi government and the central government pushing the court to remove the Delhi High Court's stay on that matter, and this ice mask smashes just gets about 6% of the viewers think that is the most important story of the day. Interestingly, also 6% of the viewers think the plea on the Nirbhaya convicts is the least interesting. So Omar Abdullah and Mehbooba Mufti, former chief ministers, democratically elected chief ministers, were late last night detained under the draconian Public Safety Act. Remember, these two chief ministers, one of whom has also been an ally of the BJP government, have already been in detention for over 6 months now. They've been under house arrest for 6 months. Now, yesterday, the government decided to also put them under the stringent Public Safety Act. They received their detention orders late last evening. Now, the Public Safety Act, remember, is a stringent law that allows a detention without a trial. So there's no trial. There are no charges really in this case. So these are civilians, yes, former chief ministers, but they're civilians and citizens now who have been taken and put away for 6 months now with no charges. There's been no trial. They haven't been allowed to defend themselves or even ask why they've been put away and for how long they'll be put away. And now they've been put away for another 3 months at least under the stringent Public Safety Act. That's not all. There are two others from the NC and from the PDP. So there's Ali Mohammad Sagar of the NC and Sartaj Madni of the PDP, who've also been booked under this act. So what are the little reactions we're getting out of it? Well, Mehbooba Mufti's daughter, who's been handling her mother's Twitter feed, has said that this was only to be expected of this government. After all, this is a government, as she puts it, an autocratic regime that has even booked 9-year-olds for sedition. Of course, she's referring to that case in Bidar, where a mother who's a widowed mother, so she's a single mother, has been arrested, and she's been arrested for days now because her daughter took part in a school play, which somebody/this government claims was seditious. Mehbooba Mufti's daughter tweeting from the former chief minister, Mehbooba Mufti's account, raises a question: how much longer will we act as bystanders, she puts it, as they desecrate what this nation stands for? Remember, we also have the senior Mr. Abdullah, that's Farooq Abdullah, who's 82. He has already been detained under the stringent act. He's already been detained now for 5 months. He was charged with disturbing public order and has been held without any charge, without any trial since August. Now, the irony is that this PSA was actually used to arrest terrorists, separatists, and stone throwers. It was introduced by Farooq Abdullah's father, the former Chief Minister Sheikh Abdullah, to target timber smugglers. So, the irony is it has come back around, and now Farooq Abdullah has been detained under this very same PSA. But interestingly, I want to just listen in. So, what are the charges against, what is the reason for invoking PSA against these two former democratically elected chief ministers? We don't know. The government really hasn't come out to say anything. But yesterday in Parliament, the Prime Minister said this in his speech. Listen in.
महबूबा मुफ्ती जी ने कहा था, भारत ने, ये शब्द बड़े गंभीर है, उन्होंने कहा था भारत ने कश्मीर के साथ धोखा किया है। हमने जिस देश के साथ रहने का फैसला किया था उसने हमें धोखा दिया है। ऐसा लगता है कि हमने 1947 में गलत चुनाव कर लिया था। क्या ये संविधान को मानने वाले लोग इस प्रकार की भाषा को स्वीकार कर सकते हैं क्या? उनकी वकालत करते हो? उमर अब्दुल्ला जी ने कहा था कि आर्टिकल 370 को हटाना ऐसा भूकंप लाएगा कि कश्मीर भारत से अलग हो जाएगा। फारूक अब्दुल्ला जी ने कहा था, फारूक अब्दुल्ला जी ने कहा था 370 का हटाया जाना कश्मीर के लोगों की आजादी का मार्ग प्रशस्त करेगा। अगर 370 हटाई गई तो भारत का झंडा फहराने वाला कश्मीर में कोई नहीं बचेगा। ये वो लोग हैं जिनको कश्मीर की आवाम पे भरोसा नहीं है। हम वो हैं जिनको कश्मीर की आवाम पे भरोसा है।
Okay, so that speech, as you can see, raises many questions. One, first and foremost, as the Prime Minister says that the people of Kashmir trust him, many would ask then why the need to still detain for another 3 months these two former chief ministers of Jammu and Kashmir. If it's true that the government, the people of Jammu and Kashmir trust the Prime Minister, if it's true, as his government has claimed, that peace has returned, if it's true that there's no real opposition to the steps that this government has taken, then what is the need to still keep these two chief ministers and others detained under this draconian PSA Act? Now remember, it's described as draconian because it empowers the government to detain individuals whose actions can be seen as instigating, provoking or disturbing or is likely to disturb public order. So what exactly have we heard out of Omar Abdullah and Mehbooba Mufti over the past 6 months that would lead this government to believe that their actions could instigate, provoke or disturb a public order or are disturbing? Well, we haven't heard anything from them because they've been under detention. They haven't been able to speak out to anybody. They haven't been given access to phones, to Twitter, to any place to make any statements. So all we can go by perhaps is the last statement made by Omar Abdullah, for example, on Twitter, which was on the 4th of August, where he actually tweets, "Please don't take the law into your own hands. Please stay calm." So the last word we heard from former Chief Minister Omar Abdullah was a plea to be calm, not to incite, provoke, disturb public order or to incite, provoke or create any sort of violence in the state. He in fact tweeted on the 4th of August that violence will only play into the hands of those who do not have the best interests of the state in mind. This wasn't the India Jammu and Kashmir acceded to, but I'm not quite ready to give up hope. Let calm heads prevail. God be with you all. So that was his last Twitter statement. And in fact, the other controversy is over the statement the Prime Minister attributed to Omar Abdullah in Parliament, no less. In the floor of the House, the Prime Minister attributed a statement to Omar Abdullah, which the NC says he never made. So how is it possible that this statement is used and makes its way into the Prime Minister's speech, which he then makes in the floor of the House? Now, Omar Abdullah's statement, actually, which the Prime Minister claims that he made, this is worrying. It would be amusing if it wasn't the Prime Minister making the statement, is actually quoted from an article from a satirical website called Faking News. So that website published the quote on the 28th of May 2014, and you can look this up if you go online. Just do a simple Google search or go on Twitter and you can find it. You will not find any news reports when we've done a simple search where Omar Abdullah has been quoted making this statement, but it shows up in this Faking News article and nothing else. So it is unclear why the Prime Minister has quoted this satirical piece as genuine news in Parliament. Is this worrying? Does the Prime Minister's office, do his speechwriters not know the difference between fake news and real news, or are they legitimizing fake news by including it in none other than the Prime Minister of India's own speech in the floor of the House when he is talking about the issue of Jammu and Kashmir? The NC has, their national spokesperson has put out a statement saying Omar Abdullah has not shared this. And lastly, many would also raise questions about how hypocritical it is of this government to put Omar Abdullah and Mehbooba Mufti under detention. They've already been in detention for 6 months now, for another 3 months, while people like Parvesh Verma, Anurag Thakur of the BJP, who have been inciting people, who have been making hate speeches, they continue to attend Parliament, while a member of Parliament, Farooq Abdullah, has had to miss 3 sessions of Parliament so far. So is it different strokes for different folks? That's the question of the day. Thank you for joining us.